On this week's The Next Interview with our host Dolan White, you'll hear Maeve Ferguson explain exactly how leaders stop being the bottleneck by turning their expertise into infrastructure that builds trust, scales revenue, and outlives the algorithm.
Welcome to the Next Interview Show podcast. As Liam, the announcer, mentioned when we came through the front door, I'm Dolan White. I am the host of the podcast. And listeners, for those of you who are listening to the podcast over and over, and for those of you coming in the first time, I always say this coming in. I'm blessed because I get to have conversations with some brilliant guests. And today is no exception. My guest today is Maeve Ferguson, all the way from Ireland, with my best shot at that's the only shot I'll take at an Irish accent for today. Because it's the Americans that have the accents. First and foremost, there's 1,000 other things you could be doing. It's evening for you where you are now. And I just want to tell you, thank you for coming and hanging out with me and helping me empower some leaders, and grateful for you spending time, Maeve.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to dive into the conversation.
Yeah, cool. We'll get going. As I mentioned, I'm going to read your bio. It's the only time I read. The rest of the time, we're all off the cuff. So today's guest builds something most leaders never think about until it's too late: infrastructure. And Maeve Ferguson is the strategist behind high-level assessment frameworks that have helped experts generate more than $600,000 in pipelines in months, double close rates, reduce qualification time from 15 hours to just 2. Did you know you did that? That's all the stuff that I've learned about you. And you've been featured in Forbes. You work in communities like Ryan Levesque, Ryan's Communities. You help founders move beyond endless tactics to build assets that outlive algorithms. Boy, that's a whole other conversation. We'll get into algorithms. And you build you build the language that powers revenue. And that's a big deal. Yep. So that's the introduction. That's who you are. I don't know if you knew that, but that's exactly what I have for you for today. So
love it.
So since the guests haven't met you, maybe one of the first things that we can do is just take a moment or two, talk a little bit about your background, kind of where you are, that you are on a farm, which is way cool. And just kind of a little bit about your journey, and then let's have a chat for a little while.
Yeah, so I have led an interesting journey to get to working with the world's most extraordinary thought leaders. So I used to be a steeplechase jockey many, many years ago, hence why I now live in a horse farm. So I was a steeplechase jockey, did my undergrad in equine science, spent a whole chapter of my life in that world until I got smashed up in a race, and that was the end of that.
Yeah.
And then decided I better obviously get a real job. So I spent then a number of years working in financial services, trained in Ernst & Young in London, worked there for many, many years. I loved the whole corporate life. And then I moved into private equity for a number of years, where I managed a team of 47 people, headed up a couple of global functions. And that was kind of my background in corporate.
Wow.
Yeah.
E&Y's big back. That's talking about corporate. That's a big corporate.
Yeah. It was amazing. It was like, I literally, I really cherish now that I'm running my own company. I really cherish those years where you're green as grass, like wet behind the ears would not have been in it. Wet behind the ears. Sure. No idea like how the world worked at all. And it just gives you such a stellar training ground, but it also is like, that's what I see as normal. So whenever I go into companies now and see, people that kind of not even run them as businesses, they're treating their companies like a hobby, that type of thing. Sure. I think it really, really sets the bar. And then moving from that into private equity, where the bar was even higher, that was an interesting experience as well. And then I made the leap. Very, very long story cut short, I ended up catching a virus. I spent 4 years of my life in my early 30s in bed, very, very, very ill. And then I left corporate and set up my own business. So I've been doing that now for 7 years.
Wow.
And
awesome.
Haven't looked back.
Oh, that's awesome. That's such a rich background. It's funny when you talk about that, because and we'll kind of get into people that treat their businesses like hobbies.
Yeah.
It's just kind of It's funny how that works out. It's funny who some of those people may be. Um, but it's interesting because I know in my career, I spent 30 years in the software industry and grew up in that industry and led,
Yes.
global teams and did all, blah, blah, blah stuff. And then got sucked into the marketing world through the vortex of, hey, come be our CEO. Okay. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll go try it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you're in that world where there's all the kind of that structure and the richness that comes along with it. And then to move into private equity, um, which is it's a whole different animal. It's all that other stuff. The richness has to come along with it, but private equity is where the meat and potatoes kind of start to happen because
Mhm.
people put money on the line and they have no sense of humor about that sometimes.
That's one way to put it. You're
Yes,
very polite.
yes. Sometimes no sense of humor about private equity. Um, so I'm really kind of one of the things that came out of kind of looking at your background and reading stuff about you and look at your website and stuff that I do before the podcast that I'd like to talk about because I really focus in on the importance. So I lean in on leadership and empowered teams and empowered leaders.
Yeah.
And I would really like to know kind of your perspective on, that gap where you're working with a leader who sees their company, their organization kind of like a hobby. And
Mhm.
how do you recognize that and help them recognize that and then kind of move them towards a infrastructure, which means lots of different words. It's kind of like saying I'm going to the doctor. It could be a dentist or a brain surgeon. It's a
Yeah.
doctor.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of how do you help them kind of in that path to move towards that? Because that's
Mm.
without that, no amount of empowerment works.
Yeah. I think I always start with, and it might be with me with my ex-accountant hat on, but where I always spot a founder-run business where the founder is still in the business
Yeah.
is when you ask them to see their KPI dashboard. And when they look at you with a blank face or a you what, or you know that they aren't getting their KPI dashboard handed to them every Monday morning by their team. So that is always where I start because it's always a really good indicator. And it's also like it's very, very easy to observe. And again, it's easy when you're looking at things, not
Yeah.
whenever you're in them. But whenever you're looking at things, it's really easy. You've got the CEO reviewing copywriting. You've got, people in different departments having their kind of fingers in every pie across all things. You just know that it's not
Yeah.
actually structured with business divisions and leadership functions. And it's the case for every single founder-led business where you start as a one-man band or a one-woman band. And I'm exactly
Yeah.
the same. I used to push every single button in my business because it was me, myself, and I. Now
Right.
we have, we've just hired our ninth person. So I'm now, over the last couple of years, getting more and more and more detached from, I'm not involved in sales at all. I'm not involved in client onboarding at all. Client delivery, I'm down to about kind of only 15 to 20% involvement. My team are running and delivering everything else.
Good.
And I'm then able to act as the CEO, building out the next division of our company, which is a big data play that we're working on off the back of diagnostic assessments. But because I have the bandwidth and the space and the headspace to actually do those things, because I've structured the team, and again, all of that has only come from my corporate knowledge, my corporate background, building that team of 47 people,
Sure.
where it was a flat structure like me and 47. It was like crazy town. I learned so much in that experience.
Yeah.
It was the most priceless job I've ever had because now it's equipped me of like, here's what not to do. Here's what worked well. Here's how to train people up. Here's how to onboard. Here's how to treat your team. All of those sorts of things.
Yeah. I love that. And what you're talking about, Maeve, because I think, and you probably happens to you, maybe not, but I tend to get a lot of little pings on LinkedIn from people
Mhm.
saying, hey, by the way, I read your profile, not to pick on those poor people. I won't mention anybody name. I've read your profile and I can solve all your problems. I've never done it before, by the way, but I know what to do.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that comes out of that, kind of the combination of the domains of your experience between E and Y and getting into fundraising and venture capital, all of that world. Whew. Um, it is that richness that kind of comes in that gives you the ability to see it through lens. I'm kind of curious. Let's talk about your business a little bit, which is
Mm-hmm.
congratulations. 7 years is great, by the way, because you're past the 5 year itch and you're now you're on the other side of all of that.
You're growing like crazy, and I'm
Yeah,
loving it.
there
Yeah.
you go, and good for you. That's awesome. So as you're kind of in that phase, I think one of the challenges that founders and leaders suffer
Mm-hmm.
is that you said the word working in.
Mm-hmm. Instead of on.
Yeah, and there's a lot of parables about you should be working on your business, and a lot of leaders go, yeah, I'm gonna work on my business, and they have no idea what the hell that means.
Yeah.
I gotta be your kids are around, so I'll watch
Oh,
my
they're
own.
they're in bed a long time. I
All
hope they're
right,
in bed anyway.
all right, okay, good. Then I'll let that word slide. But that's as bad as it's going to get because we're a PG podcast.
It's
But
all good.
but I'm kind of curious about the kind of two dynamics. The first is as you made that shift, right, and your organization has grown, which is allowing you to focus on the data play and the assessment, and we'll come back to that a little bit from the infrastructure point. But then also working with founders, what that experience was like for you personally in that, and then how do you help that founder let go, right? Because they want to make diamonds out of that chunk of coal
Mm-hmm.
and ease into that.
Mm-hmm. So, do you mean from a leadership perspective, or
Yeah, yeah,
yeah?
yeah. Or any perspective you have on it is great.
Yes, so I think it's like the whole premise of what we do is this codification of your IP, and then turn it into permanent assets that generate leads, turn into business, and then build
Yep.
a data asset on the back end. And I think what we observe with a lot of founders who are still inside of their business, they require them to be on. So even if they are, New York Times best-selling author, they have to be on to keep peddling their book. They
Yep.
are a big, multi-six-figure paid keynote speaker. They have to be on to keep the business coming in to their business. And so
Sure.
what we see then is obviously there's a bottleneck, there's a cap, they are one human being, and where the founder is the personal brand, it then all falls to them to keep the machine running. And there's no legacy play there because, again, if we think of our business, 100 years from now, what's still going to be standing? You'll
Right.
be long gone, I'll be long gone, 100 years from now, unless they invent something magical. By the time I'm 43, I'm like, by the time I'm ready to die, there's going to be something magical that just magics you back to life. This is my goal, right?
Here you go.
Anyway, I digress. But it's like, so if we don't actually have a legacy play,
Yeah.
we need to be on to keep the business coming in, and then on top of that, a lot of founders are actually still running marketing, they're still running sales, they're still like onboarding clients, they're still doing client delivery, they're still doing even administration inside of their businesses. This is what I mean. It just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that thing is going to spontaneously combust at some point because they're just going to run out of juice.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's hard for founders to know that there's only so much they can do, right? That there's just, I love
And
talking.
delegation as well is like the most beautiful thing in the world is to learn how to delegate well. Because what I know in my team, for example, is my team are better at it than I am. Like my COO is like, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, go for it. And it's that ability to let go of the reins,
Yes.
lose the air quote control, to hand over those reins to somebody who you've trained up to be as good as you, if not better.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because I think that's that shift. There's always a piece of it, Maeve, I think where you're working in, where you're working in, right?
100%. 100%.
You got to be, but the intention is to reduce that percentage,
Yeah.
right? So that it becomes a more manageable component. So one, you actually have a life periodically,
Mhm.
that can happen. Something about family and farm things happen, right? You could
Exactly.
do in your life, but it's interesting. So as we'll come back to kind of codifying messaging and helping leaders understand how important that is because I don't think, my suspicion is that not that I've experienced this, but my suspicion is that that's a challenge for them to get really clear on that message and to be able to speak succinctly and authoritatively and do that. When you're working kind of in that case where you're trying to help someone move to you know to codify that message, to really get clear on what they're doing, and they're still stuck in that day to day, do you find yourself kind of it's that co-coaching moment where you're coaching them on, hey, let me give you some insights on, here are things, maybe if you let go of these things, we could actually move forward there. Does that happen in kind of working with your clients?
Yeah, I think it almost comes as a dual piece whenever you're an advisor or a strategist with a company. So like we work with some of the world's most famous thought leaders, and we are able to, so yes, we come in and the engagement is around the diagnostic assessment.
Sure.
But by virtue of the conversations and the chats, you're able to observe what is going on and what they actually need support with. And then those kind of strategic advisory conversations allow them to sort other stuff out, even though you're there for engagement X.
Right.
And then it turns into, long-term consulting. One of my favorite statistics inside of our business is like our client retention and renewal rate is like 86%, because we come in and that value add and seeing things from all of those different angles really, really, adds a lot of value to the client, and then they just work with us for years to come.
Yeah, I think that's really important because it's interesting. I think I've had the opportunity to work in different roles and positions and been CEO, and I call it all the blah blah blah, done all that stuff, right? And
CE whatever's.
Yeah, whatever. I call them CE umpty squats, whatever you want to call them. But in that role, I think there is that respect, trust that is garnered, right? When you can sit down with them and you're not just focused down your lane, but you're able to bring them things that are outside of their blinders. Because there's an American colloquial. I'm originally from Alabama in the United States, right? So I speak their language if ever you need translation. But it's an opportunity. We talk about when you're inside, you can't read the label from inside the jar.
Inside the bottle, yes.
So I imagine it's a challenge. So when you're working with leaders to kind of help them do that, and to help them see around them, which is the executive consulting side, which is ultimately to get to the mission that you're there for, to help them get there. What steps do you take to kind of help bring them in? I know you've talked a little bit about the assessment, and maybe that's a component of the process, but I'm really kind of curious about how you help them bring their focus in, because without that focus, they can't get to that message, to that codify who they are and what they're going to do and how to go say it. What are those steps like?
Yeah, so we always, always, always begin with the end in mind. So it often gives our clients a jolt at the start, because they think that, you're going to start at the top of the list and work the way down. And we actually begin at the very, very, very end. And then we reverse engineer out of that back step. So the diagnostic assessments that we build, that are these lead generators, lead qualifiers, the data asset on the back end,
right,
that is actually several steps upstream in terms of the funnel from where we actually start the conversation.
Yes.
So it's like I always bring them to that, like 100 years from now, what legacy does this IP want to have left in this world? Then we reverse back from there. Okay, and then we get into like, right, what products do we currently have? What life do we want to live with the products that we deliver? Because there are a range of different lives that you will live depending on this digital marketing space, as you well know.
Yes.
That you're going to live a different type of life depending on which products you choose to build and deliver, from anything from digital courses right through to, done for you services, which is what we choose to do, right through to in-person masterminds, etc. There's a myriad of options in there.
Right.
So it often stops with like, right, you as this really elite, super well-known thought leader, what life do you actually want to live? And then from there, then we get into the product conversation. Then we're reversing out of that. And as we're moving through that conversation to reverse back up to the diagnostic, we're able to identify, it's like, oh yeah, I'd love to do that, but we can't do it because of ABC, or we don't have the team, or we don't have any systems, or we don't actually have any products yet, or whatever that may be. And as part of that conversation, and you'll know this yourself from like, as you work with more and more and more people, you know exactly what questions to ask, because it's not our first rodeo. You've been through it before. You know what to spot.
Yes.
And as soon as, you know, we pull a thread in one thing, and the next thing it's Pandora's box of identifying different pieces. And then what I love to do is like you almost like identify the entire quagmire of things, but then we have to put everything neatly back into, like, I'm very logic, process control, systems, automation. So we got to actually say, like, right, here are the 74 things that we want to do. What is first? What is next? What is next? So we got to solve for problems in the right order. We got to remove kind of bottlenecks. We got to remove issues before we get to the nice to haves further down the road. And this, I see this a lot with founder-led businesses, is where they are solving for completely the wrong problem. So they have something going on in their business, whatever that may be, and they jump to like changing their products, and you're like, your problem is like way top of funnel. And they're fixing the wrong thing, and then they fix it. They spend all this money fixing it, and then they can't figure out why it didn't change anything, but they were actually solving for the wrong root cause.
Yeah, I love that. And leaders, as you listen to this podcast, somewhere on your phone, there's a little rewind button. Go back like 2 minutes on the rewind. This is my picture of my vacation chair. But anyway, my chair on a beach somewhere. Someday if I ever retire. But go back, rewind, and listen to that. Which I think is very important, what you were just, there's about a dozen things inside of that, Maeve, that you talked about, I think, that are very important, which starting with the end in mind, but then starting from the bottom up.
Yeah.
I think there is a propensity, in particular, in almost any kind of executive coaching, right, where they come in and they start at the CEO. Tell me the problem, and the CEO's perspective of the problem is 6 layers removed from where the problem actually happens to reside.
Exactly, and it's never the problem. Sorry, from what we observe, the problem that they think is the problem is rarely actually the problem.
That's so important.
And again, tying through the big four, I spent my entire life in that place identifying, like, doing root cause analysis.
Yeah.
So it's never the surface level. What the symptom is never actually the root cause.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That's such a good statement, because there is an assumption that gets made, and there is as part of the assumption, because there's all the domains of pressure, right? There's pressure down from the board, pressure up from the team, pressures from customers and vendors that all come in, that coalesce. And so that C umpty squat, whoever they are, says, I know how to fix it. I'll just lower the price.
Yeah.
And that has
it's never the price.
Yeah, no. As a matter of fact,
I don't want to scream in your podcast, but it's never the price.
I know. You can screen that if you'd like, but I'll dub that in later if we can. But anyway, if I edited the podcast, we would do that, but I don't. So, but it's so important that we touch on that, because, matter of fact, it's funny, because usually if I'm talking to a client or someone and they mention, well, I need to be more competitive, lower the price, my answer always is no, raise your price.
Yeah. 100%, and your who changes completely when you do.
Yeah, then you're not charging enough. Then raise your price. Yeah, but then the yeah buts come in, and then we have a whole nother conversation. So,
but when you raise your prices, you live in a completely different life, because you're working with completely different people.
Very much so. So when you're going, when you go in and you're working through kind of the steps that you go through, and by I love your background in analysis, with risk analysis. It's like, yeah, most executives don't have that background. It's not a component of who they are. Matter of fact, in my career, a lot of the executives that I've worked with kind of got there accidentally, which I think we all more or less kind of get to where we get to accidentally sometimes. It happens. But so when you're working with that CEO and you begin and you come to them and you're presenting to them, here
Hmm.
are actually some of the challenges that we see that you really should be focusing on and fixing on. I think there's the thought process of that executive that you're talking with, whatever rank they are, founder or C, whatever we want to call them. But then there's also in the back of their mind, there's a little nagging wheel that turns that says, well, why didn't I know this? Why didn't my people tell me this? Why? How do you kind of manage, just anecdotally, how do you help them kind of manage that thought process,
Hmm.
revealing something they don't know?
Yeah. So I think I love this question. Really, really insightful question. And for me, it all ties back to diagnostic assessments because these diagnostics that we build are like the Enneagrams of the world, the Myers-Briggs of the world, DISC, Strength Finders, those sort of personality assessments. So I have a
Sure.
deep interest. So yes, we build the infrastructure to build those types of things. But I also have a deep interest in human behavior, etc.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things to do is observe patterns of behavior. And it's, whenever you're working with somebody in person, so we
Mhm.
do like VIP days, or, like, and sometimes they're in person. We do, so we're working with people for like long stretches of time privately together. And when you're tuned into this type of thing, you start to really quickly see what type of personality they are. And then all it is about reframing the message to suit the type of person they are. So, for example, Myers Briggs, I'm an INTJ. Enneagram, I'm a 3 with a 4 wing. I am very, very internally referenced. So, if I was advising me, I would be bearing all of those things in mind as I communicate said message to me, because I'm not looking externally for validation or to check what other people think or getting social proof. It comes from inside. So you gotta observe the person you're working with. I love to, as I'm working with people, I'm like putting them through diagnostics inside my brain. And I'm like, yeah, they're such and such. And it just becomes kind of like, right, here's how this needs to be handled with this specific person.
Sure.
Not a lot of people, but a lot of, some people have massive ego. And the last thing you're going to do is like trample on that ego. So you got to do a dance and play with
Yeah.
who they are as a person. And to me, it's like what I always view, and I was the exact same when I was in corporate. It's like you're not coming in telling people what to do. You're jumping alongside them and say, like, let's go and do this together. So it's like it's a mutual respect. So you're meeting them here. It's not a vendor, client relationship. It is like you're meeting them here. For those who are listening, I'm like meeting level on. I know if you're not watching the video, you can't see what I'm doing right now. Like you're meeting them where they're at. It's a
Yeah.
mutual respect. It's not I'm some high flying consultant coming in telling you what to do. Instead, it's like, let me sit over your side of the table with you and let's design and build this together. And I think that getting people on side, it is definitely a skill set. But again, from years in corporate, that was a required skill set that you either got good at or the machine spat you out.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
I love that, Maeve, because I think that's really important from a leader, to ground off to the leadership side. There is that having that ability to be, as a vendor or consultant,
Mm-hmm.
coach coming in with them. In this particular case, I'll call it consulting because you're really helping them. You're not coaching them; you're consulting them.
Consulting, yeah.
Um, but as you're doing that with them, to come in, and I appreciated there are those moments where it's kind of like that a little bit. It takes a while. Um, and for those of you who are listening on audio, that's bumping two knuckles together there. So just to let you know, it was because you missed it. Watch the YouTube video; you'll see it. Um, but it kind of, as you're doing that, I think that's really important. That's why, just on another side, you said something in passing a few minutes ago, about an 86% renewal rate, right? Which is which is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
From a consulting and coaching perspective, that's an incredible renewal rate. That's a value statement on the value that you bring. It's not about the money,
Mm-hmm.
because the money is a derived outcome.
Exactly. It's never about the money.
No, money's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
If you do these things, money is going to happen. If you approach it,
A client the other day is like, "Can we just pay you $1 million and you can do this for us?" That is the type of client delivery that's where the bar is. That's what's expected.
right,
And then our clients are just like begging us, "Can you do this as well? Can you do this as well? Can you do this as well?" And it all comes from like that respect and joining them, going sitting with them where they're at and working with them.
sure. Well, then you get to know them over a period of time, and through that, one of the things I found in my career in doing that was, and there was a gentleman that actually taught me this. His name was Joff Wells, a gentleman from the UK, Joff.
Mm-hmm.
And but one of the things that we learned together, this early, way pre-white hair and black, when I had black hair and young man, and was when you're working with your client, it's not about the moment from a consulting perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It is about consulting with you 10 years from now. I love
Mm-hmm.
your conversation around who do you plan to be in 100 years,
Mm-hmm.
and what message do you plan? Because if you're approaching it and you're consulting with them from that perspective, you're a partner. You're not a vendor. You're
Mm-hmm.
not even a consultant. You're a family member.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then as the family member, there's times, candidly, when you may come and go, when you may consultant for a period and go away for a period, come back, consult more, but the
Mm-hmm.
quality of the consulting goes up over time
Yeah, exactly.
because you're deeply embedded in how they do business. That's where the investment pays off, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Um,
you get it, and they're not, you're not trying to start again from scratch, getting somebody else to get it. You know.
yeah, which is funny because I think so. Coaches and consultants and leaders, as you listen to this, coaches and consultants, it's not about today's engagement. That's important and about delivering the value. It's about the future. And leaders, as you're listening to the kind of if you're looking for if you're trying to find solutions to the challenges you face, that's the partnership you're looking for. Which is why you're going to call Maeve. We'll talk about that at the end. We'll get to that part where this is why you call Maeve. So one of the things that I do want to come back to as you're working with the clients, there's a um, are there common things that you discover that you kind of go ding ding ding, I've seen this before? And if there are kind of like the top two or three things, like one of the things that comes to my mind that I experienced in the marketing industry, um, getting to go hang out with guys like Tony Robbins and Graziosi and blah blah blah, all those cats, right? Um, is why do they have such a hard time getting clear on who they are? So are there things that you find when you're working with your clients that you see that are
Mm-hmm.
common challenges?
Yeah, so probably the biggest one, and then this is why we chose to solve for this, is that they haven't actually codified their IP. So they don't have assets built inside their companies that translate their IP for them when they're not in the room. They don't have the infrastructure, that you mentioned earlier. They don't have the infrastructure that allows the machine to keep rolling whenever they're off or stopped or busy or working or whatever. And that lack of infrastructure, the lack of a permanent asset, is something that I saw to be really, really common, especially at the kind of the upper echelons of the thought leadership market.
Yeah.
And it's almost like makes me laugh too, because all of the real lower end of the expert market, what I call a lot of the struggle bus people, they have all of the infrastructure and all of the courses and all of the buttons are pushed, but they have no pipeline whatsoever. They have no leads, they have no market attraction. Nobody is really interested in what they have to
Sure.
say.
Yeah.
And the beautiful problem that we have actually flipped into and solved for is that the absolute where the individual's IP is absolutely stunning, like true intellectual property. They have the opposite. They have a massive following. They have people begging them to work with them, but they don't actually have the infrastructure to turn those followers and those fans into revenue inside the company.
Yeah, I think that's so important. So one thing let's take a moment. And I want to clarify something you just said, and
Mm-hmm.
ask you, just because I think I know. Um, it's kind of, when I tell my wife I understand, I don't, but I say I understand, just mostly out of fear sometimes. Um, but so you say codify IP.
Hmm.
So I think leaders, and pay attention to this part. This is really important. When you are, because intellectual property, and particularly if you're doing VC work or M&A work or IP, is gold.
Hmm.
Um, but you're talking, when you're working with them, what does it mean to codify IP? What specifically is that?
Yes, brilliant. So, what a lot of, I love that question. So, what a lot of people are doing is that they have a methodology that they use, a framework that they follow, the process that they do.
Hmm.
They don't actually even know it's intellectual property. So, you might have listeners going, like, I don't have any IP, what you talking about?
That's the point. Yeah.
Every single one of us have intellectual property, our way of being, our model of reality, our view of the world, or how we do things. That is the intellectual property. And for different use cases, it's going to kind of look and feel a little bit different. So for some of our clients who, for example, Harvard professor, this is statistically validated intellectual property. It has been through rigid statistical modeling, validation testing. All of it has hit all of the benchmarks of like really, really, really sophisticated IP. That's one end of the spectrum.
Hmm.
We also have people who have process based methodology, they have systems, they have frameworks, they have ways of being and ways of doing things. That is also intellectual property, but they haven't codified it, as in they haven't documented it, they haven't turned it into a formalized framework, they haven't necessarily named it. And then for most people, they haven't taken it to the next stage where then they take that codified IP and turn it into infrastructure in the form of a diagnostic assessment that then shares their expertise with their market without them having to be there. That shows their market the gap between where they are and where they want to be, and therefore why they are the optimal solution. So the first piece is like, we actually call it on our VIP day, it's actually called IP extraction, where we take our clients through a very, very specific process and then present back to them their intellectual property. And they're like, oh my goodness, I've never ever thought of it in this way. And
I
then
love
from
that.
there, we turn that IP into a lead generating asset.
Yeah, I love that. That's so important, leaders. Go back and listen to that, leaders, because it's so important. Because many times, I will respectfully throw one of my customers under the bus. Um, but many times that's a blank spot, because they perceive themselves as intellectual property from an IP perspective as something that's big and kind of nebulous, and I'm this, and worked with four founders a couple of weeks ago, and one of my questions to them was, let's talk about what you do and
Mm-hmm.
your worthy ideal. What is it that you're working for and towards your goals, and why you do what you do? And I got four different answers, and which is typical, I think, in a lot of organizations when they don't realize that. So what's important about your company? Well, we don't. Well, we don't really have anything. Yeah, okay, yes, you do. Let's start. Let's go back to that point. So when you're in, and I love that. So listeners, go back and listen to what Maeve was just talking about. I think that's a really important conversation. Everybody has intellectual property. That is your value. That is your PE. That is who you are. That's what generates the leads and generates your traffic. Get really clear on that. And if you don't know how to find it, I don't do that. Call Maeve. We'll talk about how to do that in a minute. Um, when you're working with the organizations, one of the things that was in your bio that I read earlier was, um, we call outlive algorithms. In my mind, I call it sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
Algorithms are going to change. Facebook's algorithm is tonight at 4 o'clock is going to be different than yesterday, right? Blessed of little hearts. Um, how do you help them really get clear on the sustainability when they're going through this exercise and codifying IT, the value and how to make that a sustainable component?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it comes back to the permanent asset piece. And the permanent asset that is the diagnostic, what it is actually a positioning play. So if you think about diagnostics, there are three main types. One end of the spectrum, we have what's better known as the quiz funnel, the 6-7 questions, bang,
Sure.
bang, bang, lead qualifier. It works super, super well. We have a client in the golf space running $1 million a month in ads to their quiz funnel. Hundreds of thousands of leads, ridiculous volume of sales. Amazing, but not an authority play, not a positioning play. Other end of the spectrum. Yeah.
Sure.
So other end of the spectrum, we then have what we call these multidimensional diagnostics. So these are the Enneagrams of the world, the happiness scales of the world, Myers-Briggs, etc. So that is where it is you are becoming a household name. So when I say I'm an INTJ, you know exactly what I mean. I'm talking about Myers-Briggs. That is becoming a household name. You almost become a verb in time. And then somewhere in between the two is actually where most people land. And this is for the coaches, the consultants, the strategists, the advisors, the service providers, where you have a framework or a methodology, i.e. your IP, and essentially you're asking your leads questions about each of the areas that you help people with that then give them a score. So then it acts as a gap analysis tool. But the piece that works here that outlives the algorithm is that how this is framed, the questions that we are asking are so insightful that the lead automatically knows this person gets what they're doing. So it's an authority play, and we don't have to then dance on TikTok or whatever it may be. We're obviously using all of the different channels that are available to us.
Yeah. Rent the jet and have your picture taken next to it. No, we don't need. No, we don't have to.
Or don't rent the Lamborghini in your life.
I was going to say, you don't need a yellow Lambo, and you don't need to sit on the hood.
Especially when it's rented. No, just don't do it.
No.
But so the whole idea is that we move out of this bro marketer, like cheap and nasty tactics and hacks and little, this little whistle and this little whatnot, trying to scrape a lead here and there, and instead we build a super sophisticated permanent asset that not only generates leads into the company, not only acts as a conversion mechanism, but the biggest play of all, especially in this AI world, is the data and the asset that creates on the back end, because you start to get hundreds and hundreds of data points against every single point in your market. That is a monetizable asset that is worth more than any of the clients that you'll sign on the front end. So it's always about the data, not actually about the clients happen anyway, but the data on back end is actually the asset.
Yeah, I love that, Maeve, because I think when that's next episode of podcast is how to define value inside of an organization, because it's funny because when you're working with a client and you're talking about PE, you're 1-to-1, 3-to-1, 5-to-1, whatever you're talking about from that ratio in there's the perception that every client is, because I've got 1,000 clients, I have I can have a 12-to-1 PE. That's has nothing to do with it. It has a play, it has a purpose, but that is not going to be the deciding factor on what your performance looks like. So when you're working, boy, we've got a ways to go yet before I'm done with questions. As you tell me all of these things, I warned you we weren't going to get to a half hour. We were going to go past a half hour. It's nighttime for you. I'm going to be respectful of your time and only go for a little more. But one of the things that struck me by you talking about what you're doing with the data points and getting better, sustainability is a natural outcome.
Yeah. So I can go to town in this one. So
yeah, I want to hear that. Yeah.
So we build a lot of agentic AI solutions for our clients. So AI agents that work like a little army. This is where I have all my fun, where we are designing and building and deploying AI agents for our own company and all of our clients, where we actually use the data that the diagnostics provide to optimize top of funnel. So what we're able to do is know exactly where over time these agents are analyzing exactly which piece of Facebook ad copy, which creative they clicked on, which pathway, which answers that they provided inside of the diagnostic,
Sure.
back to patterns of behavior. So the agent is observing the patterns of behavior that are going on inside the diagnostic, who bought our our 15K thing, who bought our 50K thing, who bought our multi-six-figure thing, and all of that, the routing engine that's built into the diagnostic, we are then able, or we as in AI agents, my little army, are then analyzing all of those metrics, all of those KPIs, all of those data points over time, and then pinging a Slack message to the marketing team to say, go and do more of this and less of that. And this is completely automated. It just runs, so it becomes a self-optimizing flywheel over time, where the diagnostic gives us performance data. Then we're able to run that through my intellectual property, which is how I built the agent to know how to analyze this and what to do with it and what to inform the marketing team. Here's what to go and do more of. And we're doing that at every single touch point of the business. Our sales team has a sales conversation. An AI agent within 4 minutes delivers an analysis of here's what you did well, here's what you need to do better, here's where you won the sale, here's where you lost the sale. And these AI agents are just at every single touch point of the company, just running like a little army, self-optimizing like a flywheel.
Yeah, I love that. Man. So I have a virtual Dolan that I've built, and anyway, another conversation another day. But this is your podcast, not mine. But I love that because I think there's a fear. I spent a lot of time talking about AI. There's fear around what do I do with AI, and the challenge with AI is finding that agentic that AI use, right? Because you can use AI to go do all kinds of wacky stuff, but it is that agentic and human combination that gives you the ability, because ultimately it is humans that we're influencing and is not persuading. Not to quote Cialdini, but it is influence that we're focused on. And I love that from the AI agentic perspective, to be able to see it. I would imagine from an organization's perspective, and I'm going to extrapolate what you just talked about, which is not just the sustainability, but the velocity.
Yeah. It's just the speed of learning, the speed of optimization, the speed of everything from a marketing, sales, client delivery perspective has just, like, we live in the most stunning chapter of the world ever. Like, I firmly believe it is the opportunity that is sitting here for every single one of us is absolutely mind-boggling. And it just feels like a big, massive race, because it's so incredible what is possible. Some of the things that I build every day, and you're like how are we even doing, like, even like 6 months ago, this wasn't physically possible.
Right.
And you're just rolling them out now as though, like, and then you start to normalize it and you're like, oh, like, that's normal. And then you're like, sit back a second, like, no, it really, like, I got my first mobile phone when I went to university. Like, this is insane, you know?
It is so much. The things that we can, I sent my kids, as we mentioned earlier, I raised boys, right? A bunch of boys. The youngest one's now 33, but
Wow.
Yeah, being 72, I'm entitled to have a 33-year-old now. But it's fun because I sent them my avatar Dolan, a video of me as Dolan, and of course the response back was, "Dad, that's creepy."
Of course.
Dad, that's really creepy because we know that's not you. But it's interesting, but these are things that, to your point, a year ago, 6 months ago, 90 days ago, were incredibly difficult to do.
And it's getting easier and easier every day.
Yeah, and it will continue to be so. And that's why leaders, I would challenge you to, and I say this on many podcasts, if you're not studying AI, paying attention to AI, you will be left behind.
I think as well, though, it is a rabbit hole. So you gotta work on the right things, because it's very easy to jump in and just start building random stuff.
Yeah,
you got to build, again, back to the same principle. We got to solve for the right problem.
Right.
There's no point in building a client onboarding agent if you've got a lead pipeline problem top of funnel. The
Yeah.
client onboarding agent is not going to solve for that. So that's a huge piece of the work we do with our agentic AI clients, is sit down and actually map out the ontology of the company and where we should actually build the agents for, instead of just building a new shiny pony that doesn't actually solve for anything.
Yeah, that doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Other than
It's cool and it works, but it's not solving any problems.
Yeah, that's
so
a time suck.
solve the biggest problems, and then over time, then you just have this like entire little army working for you, and
Right.
it's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So there's as I mentioned, we also mentioned there's no elegant way out of the podcast. So we're gonna
Done. End of conversation.
okay, I'm out. No.
All
So a couple things I want to do. So I love this conversation, and leaders, there's so many things that come out of this conversation. I would really am going to invite you to pay attention to. One is know the problem you're solving for, and generally it's not the problem you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So know where to start and really give thought to where that is, and seek help. Leaders, we have a tendency, and it's not a gender thing. Men and women we have a tendency to be stoic in our approach to being leaders. I am the leader, therefore I wear the badge, therefore I must know all things, or I'm perceived vulnerable. Be vulnerable. Ask for help, and go seek expert help. When you do, that's kind of like if you're going to go find a specialist, you're going to go find a specialist, because that person is going to help you get to an outcome. So seek that. So with that thought in mind, my question is then, tell me a little bit let's talk a little bit about the kind of clients that you like to work with, and the kind of clients you don't like to work with, because we're not a fit for everybody. I know I'm not.
Yeah.
Trust me. But I'm really kind of curious, Maeve, about how that works from a fit perspective, and what do you look for from a client perspective?
I love it. So, very simple rule: I don't work with pittas, what we call politely inside get in the ass clients. Like, those days are long gone, thankfully. If they're a pitta, not welcome. We don't even make an offer. It's just like, you're not going to fit in here.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. But really, we work with some of the biggest thought leaders in the industry, or in the world. Sorry, we work with people who are household names, and that is kind of one end of the market. But where I love to work is with people who have true intellectual property. It's not something they woke up at whatever age and decided they wanted to be a life coach and Googled on ChatGPT how they should do it and then call themselves an expert. I love working with people who have true intellectual property and want to actually build a proper business or a proper company, not what you see in the digital streets anyway, the side hustle, or they're treating their business like a hobby, and they think they posted on Instagram 4 times and they should have made $1 million by Friday. That I have zero interest in working with people like that. So it's those who are building real businesses, real companies, and they can also see they can see the value not only of diagnostic assessments and how they are the best way to bring qualified leads into the business, but also they have the foresight to see the value of the data play on the back end. And they're playing the long game. To quote Dory Clark, we're thinking about the long game. We're playing the long game. We're not trying to make a quick buck today. These are obviously client generators and all of that stuff, which is amazing. But there's a much more beautiful legacy play to be made on the back end. And those are the type of founders and CEOs that I love to work with, where they maybe even have an exit strategy further down the road, and they know that they can monetize the data off the back end of the diagnostic between now and then, and the data actually gives them a way better exit.
That's awesome. That's a great. So leaders, I would encourage you reach out to me. And there, other than in the show notes, I generally don't share links and URLs on the podcast, because if you're driving to the grocery store, you're not going to write it down. You're not going to remember. But I'll make sure in the show notes, leaders, look at the show notes and pull the links and have a conversation with the appropriate person on Maeve's team about what they do and about what that would mean to you personally and your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether or not you establish a relationship, you'll come away better because you'll learn something. That really is the intention. Go learn something.
Exactly.
So I will encourage that. So Maeve, we're gonna exit. So
We're gonna exit.
we're out. But I want a couple of things. We start with gratitude. I want to end with some gratitude. I have really enjoyed the conversation,
Me too.
and be grateful for your transparency and what you talk about from an importance perspective, because a lot of the insights that you brought from your E&Y experience and your venture capital experience and the money stuff,
Yeah.
no sense of humor, those people, but bringing that into what you do to help companies find their value, not only find their value, but get to their value. It's one thing to find it.
It's to get to the value. Yeah. Because it is there. It just hasn't been codified.
Yeah, that's the hairy part. The hairy part is, okay, we found it. Now, what do we do with it?
Yep, 100%.
I just want to tell you thank you for sharing your insights and being willing to come hang out with me again.
So cool. I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. I enjoyed it. Okay, leaders, 2 things always at the end of every podcast. The very first thing is give the podcast a know, like, share, or follow. It has nothing to do with vanity numbers. Talk about algorithms. It has to do whether the podcast is elevated or not. I think this week, maybe I discovered I'm in the top 50 in Japan. I don't know how that is.
Very good.
I don't know. Or somewhere, Zimbabwe, maybe. I don't know. But do give it a know, like, share, or follow, because it elevates the podcast. The most important reason why I ask that is the intention for the podcast is to empower leaders. My personal mission is to empower 1 million leaders. Okay. We are on the hook to take care of each other. So share this podcast with a leader who you know can learn something from what Maeve talked about. Do one thing and listen to the podcast, but turn it into action. Take one thing that Maeve talked about and test it. Try it. Make a call. Do that. Otherwise, this is merely entertainment. And I'm happy to be entertaining you, but give it a whirl and try this to improve your business. And on that note, Maeve, thank you for being here with me as my guest. And I will see everybody else, leaders, next Tuesday, the next Interview Show podcast. I'm Dolan White. I'm the host. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for listening to this week's The Next Interview Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and then take time to turn what you heard here into action.